8 hours of sleep and you still wake up exhausted. If you've ever had that experience, and most people have, the instinct is to blame yourself. You stayed up too late, you looked at your phone, you weren't disciplined enough. But here's what most people never find out. The problem, often, has nothing to do with how long you slept. It has everything to do with when you woke up. There is a specific biological reason why a person can sleep 8 hours and feel worse than someone who slept 6.5. And once you understand it, you stop thinking about sleep in terms of hours and start thinking about it in terms of cycles. That shift alone changes how most people approach their nights. Let's go through what's actually happening. Sleep is not one continuous state. It's not like being unconscious for 8 hours in a flat, uniform way. Your brain moves through distinct phases during the night, and those phases repeat in a predictable pattern called a sleep cycle. Each cycle lasts approximately 90 minutes. Within each cycle, your brain passes through several stages. The early stages are lighter sleep. Your body temperature drops, your heart rate slows, you're drifting. This transitions into deeper, slow-wave sleep, where the body does its most significant physical repair work. Growth hormone is released, muscles rebuild, the immune system gets active. Metabolic waste clears from the brain. This is the stage where your body is genuinely restoring itself. Then, the cycle moves into REM sleep, rapid eye movement, where the brain becomes highly active. Dreams happen here. More importantly, memory consolidation happens here. The brain processes and stores what you learned during the day, makes connections between information, and regulates emotional responses. REM is where the brain restores itself. After REM, the cycle completes and begins again from the top. Lighter sleep, deeper sleep, REM. Over and over, roughly every 90 minutes throughout the night. Here's what matters for how you feel in the morning. At the end of a sleep cycle, right after REM, your body passes through a brief period of very light sleep, almost at the surface of wakefulness. This is the natural exit point. If you wake up at this moment, the transition from sleep to consciousness is smooth. Your body was ready, the cycle completed. You feel not necessarily fully rested, but coherent, like you can actually function. But if an alarm interrupts you in the middle of deep, slow-wave sleep, which can happen at any point in the cycle, depending on timing. Chunky Kuntus you. Wake up to something very different. The experience of being pulled out of deep sleep mid-cycle has a name: sleep inertia. Sleep inertia is the grogginess, the confusion, the feeling that your brain is working through wet concrete for the first 20 to 40 minutes after waking. It's not just unpleasant. During sleep inertia, cognitive performance, reaction time, and decision-making are measurably impaired. In some studies, comparably to being legally drunk. This is the feeling most people are familiar with. The alarm goes off. You genuinely do not know where you are for a moment. You hit snooze. You lie there, in a strange state that isn't sleep and isn't being awake. You eventually drag yourself up and spend the next hour feeling like someone put your brain in backwards. That is sleep inertia. And the severity of it is directly linked to which stage of sleep you were in when the alarm hit. Wake from light sleep or the end of a cycle. Minimal inertia, relatively smooth transition. Wake from deep, slow-wave sleep. Severe inertia, the wet concrete experience, the kind that can affect how you feel for hours. The important thing to understand is that the stage you're in at the moment of waking is not random. It depends on the total time you slept and how the time aligns with your 90-minute cycle structure, which means you have more control over this than most people realize. Here's where the math becomes practical. If each sleep cycle is approximately 90 minutes, then certain total sleep durations will naturally end at the completion of a cycle, when your body is in its lightest, most ready-to-wake state. 7.5 hours is 5 complete cycles. 6 hours is 4 cycles. 9 hours is 6 cycles. Compare that to 8 hours, which falls in the middle of a cycle for most people, or 8.5 hours, also mid-cycle for many. These durations sound like they should be better because they're longer, but if they land at the wrong point in the cycle architecture, they produce worse waking experiences than the shorter options that complete cleanly. This is why some people consistently feel better after 7.5 hours than after 8.5. Not because more sleep is bad, but because the timing of when the sleep ends relative to the cycle structure matters alongside the total duration. This doesn't mean everyone should sleep exactly 7.5 hours. Individual cycle length varies slightly. Some people run closer to 80 minutes, some closer to 100. Sleep cycles also shift across the night, with deeper slow-wave sleep concentrated in the earlier part of the night and more REM in the later cycles. And factors like stress, alcohol, illness, and age all affect cycle timing. But the principle holds broadly. Waking at the end of a cycle, at a natural light sleep exit point, produces meaningfully better mornings than waking mid-cycle, even if mid-cycle means technically sleeping longer. The implications for how you actually set your alarm are more straightforward than they might seem. The simplest approach is to work backward from when you need to wake up, counting in 90-minute blocks. If you need to wake at 6:30, sleep times that put you at cycle endpoints include midnight, 10:30, 9, and 7:30 the previous night. These are approximately 5, 4.5, 4, or 3.5 cycles later. Obviously, some of those are too few cycles to be adequate. 3 cycles is 4.5 hours, and most people will not be sufficiently rested. But the calculation helps identify which bedtime puts you at a natural exit rather than mid-cycle. The addition to this calculation that many people miss is falling asleep time. You don't fall asleep the moment you lie down. Average sleep onset, the time it takes to actually fall asleep after getting into bed, is around 15 minutes for most people in normal conditions. So if you're trying to begin your first cycle at 11, you want to be in bed and settled by around 10:45. There are also now several apps and calculators built specifically around sleep cycle timing. You enter your wake time and they calculate ideal bedtimes. These aren't magic and they work with averages, but they move you closer to cycle-aligned waking than picking a time purely based on how many hours sound adequate. The deeper shift here is moving from thinking about sleep as a quantity to thinking about it as a structure. Not just how much, but how you arrive at morning. There's one more piece of this that affects mornings significantly, and it has to do with what happens when you try to recover cycle disruption with the snooze button. When your alarm goes off and you hit snooze, your brain attempts to re-enter sleep. And it can do this, often within just a few minutes. But the cycle it re-enters is not simply a continuation of where it left off. What typically happens is that the brain slides back into a light or early cycle state rather than where it was. Then 10 minutes later, the alarm fires again. You're pulled out of this new shallow cycle. The disruption happens twice, sometimes 3 or 4 times. The result is rarely restorative. What it produces in most cases is fragmented light sleep that provides almost no recovery value while extending the period of sleep inertia. You spend an additional 20 to 40 minutes in a state that is neither genuinely restful nor genuinely awake, and the sleep debt from the original disruption doesn't get meaningfully repaid. For most people, a single alarm timed slightly better at a cycle endpoint produces a significantly better morning than the same total time, including snooze cycles. This doesn't mean waking with a single alarm is easy or immediately natural, especially if the habit of snoozing is deeply established. But the biology of what the snooze button actually does to the cycle structure is worth understanding before deciding whether the extra fragments are worth it. The practical summary of all of this comes down to a few changes that don't require any equipment, any supplements, or any dramatic shift in how you live. The first is choosing a consistent wake time and working backward from it in 90-minute blocks to find your ideal bedtime. Not picking a bedtime based on when you feel like going to bed, choosing it based on when the math says a cycle will complete. The consistency of wake time also matters for your circadian rhythm. Your body maintains a biological clock, and the more consistently you wake at the same time, the more precisely that clock sets itself, which improves sleep quality over time. The second is accounting for sleep onset. Add 15 minutes to whatever bedtime you calculate. You're not starting your first cycle the moment your head hits the pillow. The third is reconsidering the snooze cycle. One alarm, placed at a cycle-aligned time, tends to produce better mornings than multiple alarms used as a negotiation with yourself over how long to stay in bed. And the fourth, something that's easy to overlook, is that sleep quality and sleep timing interact with everything else we've talked about. Caffeine timing affects how easily you fall asleep and how deeply you sleep. Light exposure in the morning helps set your circadian clock so that your body is biologically ready to wake when your alarm fires. Hydration affects how you feel upon waking. These systems work together. None of this requires perfection. A rough alignment with cycle timing is better than none. An approximate bedtime that gets you close to a natural exit point beats a time chosen at random. Small adjustments, applied consistently, compound in the same way that small misalignments compound in the opposite direction. Here is the thing that most people find surprising when they actually start paying attention to this. The difference between waking mid-cycle and waking at cycle end often doesn't feel like the difference between more and less sleep. It feels like the difference between being a functional person and not being one. The shift is significant enough that many people report it as one of the most noticeable improvements they've made to their daily energy. Not exercise, not diet, not supplements. Just waking up at a different time. 8 hours is not a magic number. It is a cultural average that became a standard recommendation. Your brain doesn't care about the number. It cares about where you are in the cycle when the alarm fires. Pay attention to that, and the mornings get easier. Not eventually, usually within a few days. If this changed how you think about why you've been waking up tired, hit the like button, share it with someone who hits snooze 4 times every morning and wonders why they still feel exhausted. And if you want more content like this, clear, practical, science-based, subscribe. New videos are coming.